So my name is Asha Murphy. I'm a licensed professional counselor at the Mental Health Service.
And I am Miranda Brown, also a licensed professional counselor at the Mental Health Services as well.
So welcome. We are pleased to introduce you to the Emotional Wisdom webinar series. So within this series, we're going to discuss practical skills for handling stress, anxiety, and depressed moods in your everyday life. So today we're going to really start on responding particularly to stress and anxiety, and so we'll walk through that in our series today. But to kind of give you an idea of what to expect in the future, we will be talking more about how depressed moods come into play and how we can manage those as well. So what we really want to start off talking about, I guess, is emotion. You know, Miranda and I are both therapists in the mental health service, and we talk about emotions all day, kind of every day with clients. So we know that those can be kind of difficult to talk about depending on what kind of family you grew up in or what kind of environment you grew up in. But the idea really in terms of what we think about with emotional wisdom is we want to really encourage everyone, all of you, to think about emotion as natural. So rather than really dismissing emotions as unhelpful or messy or hard to deal with or just things that you'd rather not approach, we want to encourage you to view them rather as internal kind of compass, pointing you towards or away from things. They can really be like messengers in some ways, and they have functions to really help you indicate what you want in life, and maybe what's not great for you or best for you and your best interest. So this idea of vulnerability is, you know, thinking about being open to your emotions, open to your own emotional experience, and to open that up to other people and share that with other people who you trust. So when we think about vulnerability, maybe at the beginning, we tend to feel anxious and scared. That's really understandable. When we, excuse me, when we experience loss of some kind, we feel sad. When we feel like we're faced with injustice and we see injustice in the world, we feel angry. Those are all really understandable emotions. They have purpose, and we can then therefore choose to respond if we're aware of them. So if you learn to pay attention to what these emotions are telling you and practice really helpful ways to respond to those, even if they're intense or uncomfortable, you'll be better prepared to navigate the ups and downs of life. And that really is what we think of when we think of emotional wisdom. So in saying all this, we want you to know we encourage you to actively seek out support, whether that's casual, built-in support, or if you think about needing a little bit more, we want you to contact us. We're in the Student Health Center on campus. We have the LSU Wellness and Health Promotions Department, who does wellness coaching and support, and then of course the Mental Health Service, who does counseling and therapy in all kinds of different formats. These resources are available to you as LSU students. So today, to review a little bit more, we're going to learn and practice active in the moment coping skills. So we may, you guys may have heard of this. What's your coping toolkit, or what's your skill set with coping? And we really want to give you some options for that today. And you may have heard of some of them, but we want to go through them and help practice them and really encourage you to use them when stress overwhelms you. So today is the coping toolkit for responding to stress and anxiety. So this poem that is listed on the slide here is by Rumi, who is an ancient philosopher. I think this was written in the 13th century in the Middle East. The Guesthouse is a poem that I use regularly with clients in my work in therapy, because it really provides a beautiful metaphor on the usefulness of emotion and just the naturalness. So really embracing emotion in a way that leaves us with less shame and guilt about feeling. So let me read this to you since it's brief. Rumi's The Guesthouse. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door, laughing, and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So in therapy, we use metaphors a lot because they really help us understand more abstract experiences internally. With this, it's a grand metaphor, honestly, that I use often, like I mentioned earlier. And to kind of give you more info about that, I think of this as, experiencing human life, experiencing your existence as being a guest house and being the host. So, what Rumi says here, I think, is if there are various types of emotions knocking at your door, and they will, that's the natural state of being human. The idea is to let all of them in. So the pleasant guests like joy, excitement, love, those things are lovely, and they're easy to let in and host, and you want them to stay a long time. But what we also know is that sometimes those feelings, those emotions are accompanied by more unpleasant guests like anxiety or distress or sorrow, loss, grief, rage, anger, all those types of emotions. If you think of them as guests coming and knocking, and you having the power to let them in, host them, sit down with them, respect them, all equally. The idea is that, the more difficult ones maybe aren't going to be coming around your windows trying to get in if you're leaving them out on the porch. They're not going to be knocking down your door. You're just going to let them in, and you have say of that. So the idea with this is kind of an idea of mindfulness, which is just awareness of what's going on internally, which may take some practice for many of you who have never done that before. I think the idea here is to let everything in, host every emotion with equality and with respect, regardless of how pleasant they are, because they're purposeful. And you'll notice often too that these emotions come together. You would never think they'd be friends or they'd guests that would come at the same time, but they do. And so what we know too is we can't shut the door to just unpleasant emotions and leave the good ones coming in. It's kind of like a one-way, two-way street, where that if you shut the door to all of them, you might feel very numb. So this is a really abstract, I guess, way of thinking about emotion. And so we wanted to start off this way. As we move to the next slide, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about stress and anxiety in the body. So with anxiety and stress particularly, and these are two different constructs, stress and anxiety. Stress is what we all really know, probably very familiar, especially as students and staff at LSU. It's normal, it's unavoidable, it's an everyday part of life. Stress means that you're motivated. Stress means that you have desire in your life to tackle tasks. But it can be very unpleasant sometimes, especially when that stress is in high levels, or maybe it's all at once. And that can be very overwhelming. And that can overwhelm our capacity to cope, really, and just sit with it. And that can lead to emotional distress. And distress, that intense amount of stress and the chronic kind of stress, can lead to more anxiety and anxious symptoms. And those of us who've experienced any type of stress or anxiety can really probably relate to this physical slide here. There's so much anxiety that lives in the body. And what I want to go over with you is that right now. So of course we experience, the thoughts of anxiety, the racing thoughts. You ruminate, you go over the same thought over and over, or maybe in behavior as well. You avoid things that really make you feel anxious, or maybe even just slightly. So procrastinating something that is on your to-do list that you don't want to do, and that causes a little bit of stress. So we have these thoughts and these behaviors, but also in the body, anxiety lives in really physical discomfort. You can identify increased heart rate, shortness of breath, dizziness, sweating, GI upset, a lot of things that kind of accompany what we call panic attacks, but also just sort of in a chronic way, these physical symptoms can come up for us. And it really can be system-wide in your body. So really the idea here is if we understand how anxiety affects the body, we can actually keep fear from escalating, and we can find helpful ways to respond with bodily sort of reactions and control. So let's understand the biology here with fight, flight, freeze response. This is our way of responding to threats. Many of you have probably heard of fight, flight, freeze. We know that this is an automatic response. It is wired in us biologically, and that's when we may anticipate something in our environment. Maybe often we use the example of approaching a bear in the woods, and you see this danger. It's very real. It's very much in your environment, and that fight, flight, freeze mode's activated. That's going to be when we think to ourselves more unconsciously in the moment. Fight, flight, freeze says, can we fight this bear? Can we fight against it? Do we need to run? Do we need to flee from the bear? Or do we need to freeze, endure the situation, and hopefully the bear doesn't see me, and hopefully it all goes away? This is the idea with fight, flight, freeze being a survival sort of mode. So of course, with all that comes with those three responses is that your body has to become aroused. So then you see those feelings of, or experience those sensations of sweating, increased heart rate, shortness of breath. And so these responses are so helpful to us when the danger is real. If we're out in the world and something happens to us, if we get mugged by someone or a car comes crashing into us or about to crash into us, these responses are very important and help us survive. But with chronic anxiety, sometimes these alarm bells that go off whenever fight, flight, freeze is tripped, it happens too frequently. And it happens when maybe threats in your environment are not as dangerous as you actually perceive them. Let's say, you walk into an exam that is really, really stressful, yes, and really scary maybe in some ways. You might have a fight, flight, freeze response to an exam, which we know is not going to threaten you physically and endanger you in that way, but your fight, flight, freeze response gets triggered anyway. And so then you certainly probably can't focus on that exam because your body is ready to fight or flee. So I want you guys to just remember that whenever you have this stress response activated, we can begin to tell ourselves in our heads something, which is, I feel terrible. And then we conclude, if I feel terrible, then something terrible must be happening. This is something called emotional reasoning. And this is a kind of cognitive or thought error that we tend to make that we'll talk about actually in another series, another webinar in our series for emotional wisdom. While our stress responses do happen automatically, we can learn to calm the body with breathing and relaxation skills when we determine that we're safe. We can condition ourselves to respond to stress and anxiety in really helpful ways and reduce the physical reactivity and allow us to think through situations a little more calmly. So now we're gonna step through what a relaxed breathing exercise actually looks like. Miranda's gonna help us with that.
Thanks, Asha. Before I get started with this first tool that we're gonna go through, I want to go back to the poem that you talked about, the metaphor, and just stress the importance of being aware of our emotions and being able to sit with them. And I like how you said that if we allow them to come in and allow them to sit with us and acknowledge and have respect, then they won't tear down our windows or bang on our doors to get in. And when you really sit and think about that, think about how we try to avoid emotions and what that does to us sometimes. If they're unpleasant emotions that we may try to avoid, we feel them coming up and we try to suppress or try to avoid or run away from or don't address. always remember that somehow, some way, somewhere, those emotions will come back up later on in life or later on if you don't deal with them and sit with them. So I think this is just a good way to put that in a very visual and metaphoric way. And I just wanted to stress the importance of that.
Yes, and it's so eloquent and beautiful the way that it's written, and
It
I think
is.
I really like how you can take the metaphor further. And you're absolutely right. I'm sure we all have experienced that. You know, we suppress emotion, and then somehow or another they come back anyway. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're gonna dive into our first piece of the toolkit, which is relaxed breathing. Um, and we call it deep breathing. And many of us reflectively try to have to remind ourselves to breathe when we're upset. Training yourself to use specific breathing exercises can help us prepare for times when stresses are really high. So we're going to practice this deep breathing together. You can look at the slide and I'm going to talk through how to put yourself in a position to practice this skill. So you sit upright or you lie down. Your posture should allow for unrestricted deep breaths. And I like to liken the deep breaths to diaphragmatic breathing, which is using your abdominal area. And if you've ever sang or exercised or done anything that you've had to be able to control breathing or use elongated breaths, you learn that that comes from a different place, which is diaphragm, and you're using your diaphragmatic breathing, which is much deeper than if you're breathing just from your chest. And a lot of the times when people are experiencing those really stressful times, they are breathing with their chest, and it's a very shallow breath. And it's hard to catch those shallow breaths where you can see people hyperventilating and losing control of just breathing. So this is a skill that you can actually practice, and when practiced correctly, you can gain control of your breath. So as I stated, you sit upright or lie down and giving yourself access to unrestricted deep breaths. You can close your eyes and it can deepen the sense of relaxation. And notice the sensations that are associated with the coming and going of your natural breath. So breathing in and out. And also another thing to learn or know about is that when we're breathing in the environment, we're breathing in toxins. And so deep breathing also allows us to get rid of the waste that we're breathing in. So it's another form of the way that we expel waste out of our body is to exhale. So you're going to slow your breath and inhale deeply from your diaphragm. And this one says you count to 4 slowly. You can use different numbers. Some people do 8 counts and do hold them longer. So you can kind of take this and count the way that feels good to you, the way that feels natural to you. So we used 4 here. So you inhale slowly, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you hold that breath at the top of your count. And then when you release that breath, remember you're releasing fully until your belly is then expanded to show that you've released all of your breath. And you count to 4 slowly again. And you can repeat this 3 or 4 times until you begin to feel a little bit more calm. Relaxed breathing actually helps us to counteract reactivity, the fight or flight or freeze that Asha talked about. But it also gives us something specific to focus on other than the anxious feelings or the anxious thoughts that you are experiencing. So we're focusing on the sensation of the breath, the way that we're breathing, the counting. And this redirects the attention from the anxious thought or the feelings that you're experiencing. This interrupts the cycle that fuels anxiety, and it helps us to return, as I stated, to a calmer state. Try using breathing apps on your phone. There's one I remember, it's called Breathe to Relax. There are several different websites out there that you can look at and try. You can Google them. There's so many free ones that will come up, and there are also some, if you want to be a little bit more, savvy, you can find some paid ones that you might be interested in, but there are several out there that you can find, and you can take them everywhere you go, so you can use them anywhere and every day. And the next the next tool we will be placing into our kit will be this grounding exercise. And again, this is one of the skills we can use in the moment. As you're experiencing anxious thoughts or feelings, you can pull out this tool and use it right where you are, and again, without anybody noticing. You can go through these exercises in your mind, especially the grounding. So a lot of the examples of grounding exercise use our five senses, and they use them to connect us more intentionally with our surroundings and with what is happening around us at the moment, which is kind of like mindfulness, right? We can think of mindfulness as being present, the here and now. So that's what grounding is about, is grounding us to back to where we are, back to what's happening right in our surroundings at the moment, instead of the anxious thoughts or feelings that we might be experiencing. So we're going to practice the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding. As we move through this, notice aspects of your current surrounding. I can notice that I'm in my room. I have on a yellow shirt, and I have my purple LSU blanket behind me. So these are things that I see. I can hear a rumbling. I think of the air conditioner. And I can smell bacon that I made for breakfast. So
Yum.
these are just things that are immediately in my environment currently as I'm here right now. If I were in my office, those things would sound different. So this is why it's important to think about where you are, your absolute surroundings, because you may be experiencing anxiety walking on campus, walking in the classroom. So maybe stepping outside and saying, okay, I'm right here in this building. I can hear, I can see this. So it allows you to take this experience to wherever you are, wherever you're experiencing that anxiety, and taking this toolkit out of your pocket and using it. So as I stated, we're doing 5 things you see. Name them and describe them maybe. Shape, color, like I said, my purple LSU blanket. So I was able to describe that. Notice 4 things that you hear, as I stated before. And these things might not have been perceptible to you before stopping and actually focusing on, what am I hearing right now? That rumbling of the air, it probably goes on all day, every day, but I'm not aware of it because I'm not focusing on it. And now you can stop and observe that. 3 things you can feel. And this can be related to touch or texture, temperature, weight of something. I liken that to a weighted blanket that I hear a lot of people talking about, that sounds like it feels so very comfortable. And then the temperature, I think, could be cold or warm. So there are different things that we can think of when we talk about what we're feeling. So it could be tactile or internal. We could be feeling hungry or feeling full. So these are just kind of different ways to be aware of what you're feeling at the time. 2 things that you can taste or smell. Like I said, I can smell the bacon. I can taste that bacon thinking about how to smell it. And a lot of the times our taste and our smell are related to memory. And that's why I said I can smell the bacon, and I can obviously remember what bacon tastes like, you know. So these are senses that we can really grab onto, and sometimes it can take you to another place that could be good. And finally, state 1 thing you like about yourself or a personal strength. And try not to overthink this one, and also try to be gentle with yourself and not be judgmental or critical. Those are also pieces of mindfulness to remember about ourselves and when we're practicing these exercises. Observe your experience with this grounding exercise. How well were you able to engage your senses, to take in your surroundings? Are you feeling more connected with the present moment? Perhaps you notice that you're feeling calmer than you were before. And much like the deep breathing, grounding helps you focus the attention away from the anxious thoughts or the anxious feelings, and you're able to focus on other things that take your mind away. Relaxed breathing and 5-4-3-2-1 grounding can be practiced anytime, anywhere, as we stated. And like I said, I think that's so important to remember, being that you're all in different environments at this time, and then later when you're on campus and you're experiencing anxiety in different places. This is important, even when you're out in the community doing things, to be able to pull these toolkits up and to use them right where you are, to return to calm. And once we practice these skills, often, and remember, this builds habits once you start to practice them regularly. And then it just kind of becomes part of your routine. And with time, you develop confidence and resiliency in the face of life stress.
Yeah, Miranda, I really like how you walked us through like how to do those, and then what really I think you emphasized that resonates with me is that I cannot focus, like I cannot, my brain is not built to focus on the anxious thought of, let's say, oh, that fight I had with my friend or my partner, and I'm so worried about it, and I'm reviewing every little like thing that I said or thing that they said, and now I can't like think of anything else, and I'm worried, and like all my body's starting to react. But like doing those grounding exercises or the breathing, I literally cannot. I don't have the like ability to be worrying about that and thinking about that, but while also be like, what does bacon taste like? And what does
Right.
it smell like? And what does this like, chair feel like underneath me? And granted, like the worrying does kind of like sometimes overpower us and like brings us back to it. But the idea, right, is to like really take our mind's eye and our mind's like energy and put it into these exercises. And like you're saying, I think practicing them regularly, even before you don't have those worrying thoughts, that can help like kind of have more control. So
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay.
Okay, we're going to talk about gaining wisdom. To better cope with stress and anxiety, we can gain wisdom about the connection between our body sensations, so what we feel, our thoughts, what we're thinking, and our behaviors, how we're acting. The relaxation strategies we just practiced today can help calm the body when the fight, flight, or freeze response is activated. We can also learn to adjust our thoughts and behaviors that are related to anxiety. Take, for example, our anxious thoughts can be incredibly convincing. We tend to underestimate our abilities to handle stress and overestimate risks when we're feeling anxious. Here's some key wisdom to remember. We don't have to believe everything our anxiety tells us. Sometimes the thought, even if it's scary, it is simply just a thought. And that's important to remember, that our emotions are very real, they're very raw, and they are experienced sincerely. But we have to think about what it is that our emotions are telling us, and realize that we can underestimate our ability to deal with those things, and then overestimate the risk that we take by allowing those emotions and thoughts and feelings to sit with us. Regarding our behavior, think about how you tend to respond when you're anxious or when you're uncomfortable. We try to avoid that. As I talked about earlier, we try to avoid some of our emotions and shift them down and suppress them. So this is an understandable response, but avoiding things only increases our distress. And so that's what I was talking about earlier. If we decrease or try to suppress or try to avoid experiencing those emotions, we become way more distressful instead of allowing them to sit with us. And like I said, they're going to come up one way or another, and it's going to be more stressful and worse than if we deal with it on the front end. So these things just kind of keep presenting themselves, which kind of verifies what we're saying. And instead, we want to acknowledge what is hard and learn to work through it. And so that's what these skills are here to help us do. And if you want to learn more about how to adjust your thinking to reduce anxiety, check out our emotional webinar that will be coming. And it is going to be called Frame of Mind. And this will help us learn how to understand and see what cognitive distortions look like and what reframing those cognitive distortions in our thought processes can look like.
Great. So here's where we tell you about how to do this stuff on your own and what to use and resources available. We know that we're always, I'm always on my phone. If I'm not on it, I have it with me. So phone apps, of course, are really helpful. They are a lot of them, and they can be kind of an overwhelming amount of options. So we wanted to let you know what our favorites are. Insight Timer is an excellent free app that it gives a lot of guided kind of meditations, also Calm, and then Headspace, which I think has an option to buy later. But what I really like about Headspace is that it really walks you through as a beginner to sort of thinking through how to ground yourself, how to think about meditation and mindfulness as very much someone who maybe has never considered it or has tried it before and didn't love it or didn't feel confident in doing it. It's really nice, and it's really it's a kind of got a wide range of options there. We also love podcasts. Most of our staff we really attach to our podcasts and follow them religiously. Meditation Minis is a really good one. There's a lot of various podcasts out there on good positive mental health and ways of managing mood. We also like psychologytoday.com. They have lots of really helpful articles that are they're not very jargony. They're very easy to read and helpful. There's one particular one, Breathing Techniques for Anxiety. It's an article that we drew a lot from today in sort of learning your own breathing practice. Kind of like Miranda mentioned earlier, there is no like one way fits all. You have to think about what's good for you, what works for you, what works for your body, and kind of adapt it to make it your own. So that's helpful. And then, like we've mentioned a couple times, we're doing this series of seminars that we typically hold in office, but we have translated them to the web. So these are our emotional wisdom webinar series that we're going to be putting out periodically on various topics related to how to manage your mood, how to manage your mental health and stress. Also, of course, we invite you to follow our social media outlets too, and we'll review those in a few minutes.
Okay. We are the Student Health Center, and located in the Student Health Center, we have medical clinic, which they do primary care, specialty care, GYN, labs, diagnostic. There are a lot of services that are offered there. They have an injection clinic as well. So these are services, all of these services you have access to because you are a student. We are the mental health service. We are a representation of the staff there. And as Asha stated earlier, we provide individual counseling. We do group counseling. There is anxiety and depression management seminars like this one. Psychopharmacology. We have a psychiatrist on staff. We have an eating disorders treatment team. So we have some very specific services that we offer that sometimes are hard to come by, and these are great services to offer to you guys. We also have wellness and health promotion, and they offer wellness coaching, nutrition counseling, group programming, and classes. They have a RAD class, which is a self-defense class, and it's offered to staff and students, which I think is super amazing to have. And they also have outreach events and the Lighthouse program, which I am a part of. So these are so many different services that the Student Health Center has to offer. So don't hesitate to check us out if you think you or a friend need any of these services.
Definitely. We have such a robust offering of things that relate to your health as a student that you have very, very much access to. So please take us up on it. And last but not least, please stay connected with us. We really value connection with our students and our campus community. And we know you're all very savvy when it comes to social media. So we're trying our best to do the same. We are on Twitter, on Instagram, or on Pinterest. And of course, our website is probably the best place to go to for any updates as well, which is just lsu.edu/SHC. And come and learn about all the resources that we have. You can also give us a call anytime. And we really thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.